we're going to be talking about the opportunities for a transport revolution with COP26 just around the corner. I think there's lots of different discussions that are happening. And this month's main topic is going to be around transport revolution. So obviously bringing a local perspective, but always interested to hear what's going on nationally and internationally as well. So I'm Jenny, I'm the chair of the Cloud Cafes, and usually supporting social media for Stroud District Green Party, who organise all of these events. There's a team that sits behind the Cloud Cafes who work very hard to get some great speakers and make sure that we have a lively discussion every single month. So very grateful to them as well. Just to remind everyone, this is recorded. If you've got any questions that you'd like answering throughout, then feel free to pop them in the chat. If you are not speaking, if you could leave your microphone on mute, just so that we keep noise to a minimum for the recording. And when we get started, we usually ask everyone to turn their cameras off and then just leave the speakers with their cameras on so that we can see them. Okay, so first of all, we're going to be having Carol Kambites, who I'm very lucky to know and have worked with. So Carol is one of our longest standing Green Party members in Stroud area, and was one of the founders, along with John Marjoram, of Stroud Ecology Party. She's a cyclist, allotment holder, grandmother, deputy mayor of Stonehouse, the list goes on. And, you know, still finds time to take part in local community and do lots of things in terms of campaigning. So one of the biggest campaigns she's been running locally is the reopening of Stonehouse Station. And she's going to tell us a little bit more about that now. So Carol, over to you.
Thank you, Jenny. I'll share my screen if you don't mind. Doesn't seem to want to actually go onto slideshow. I'm not sure why. No, never mind. Can you see that all right?
Yeah, if you click from beginning, that's just on the left-hand side, right at the top.
Got it. Thank you, Jenny.
No problem. Yes, we can see as well. So thanks.
Need tech support even for this, right? Yeah, thanks for the introduction. I sometimes think I wear too many hats. Stroud Valleys and Gloucester, and you can see in black the railway lines. The line from Gloucester coming down here splits into just north of Stonehouse. This is the one that comes to Stroud and to then Campbell, Swindon, and onto London Paddington. This branch goes to Bristol. But should you want to get to Bristol from the Stroud Valleys, it doesn't help an awful lot because the train doesn't stop. Then it goes from Gloucester, it stops in Dursley, which is down here, some back there. No, this side of them, just somewhere around there. And Dursley station has been fairly recently opened and is very successful. Is that it's run out of car parking. And part of the reason it's run out of car parking is that people drive from the Stroud Valleys to Dursley to catch the train. So the people behind Dursley station are very much in favour of the train stopping in Stonehouse as well. Excuse me, the shaded area on this map is what we see as the likely catchment area of a station, should we manage to get it open, which, as you can see, includes Stroud and down to the River Severn. So, zooming in, this is Stonehouse. This is the line to London. That's Stonehouse Station, the existing Stonehouse Station on that line. This is the line to Bristol. And the shaded bit here is where Stonehouse Bristol Road Station used to be before Beeching closed it. And And that area, or part of that area, is protected in the local plan as a site for a station. So we've called it Stroud Water Station, but you might hear it called Bristol Road Station, Stonehouse. It's the same place, so don't get confused about that. It has good access. You can possibly see, it's a bit faint, the A419 along here. So that's the main road. It's a bus route, and the access up here to the station is actually called Station Road. The area right at the top has got planning permission for housing, but on the condition that a turning circle for a bus is put in there. So that is in place. Now, the problem is the developer has just asked for a change to the planning application, but hopefully that won't go through. There's a National Cycle Route 45 also comes along here, follows the road, and there are footpaths from the site up into town. We have been criticised because there isn't a huge amount of parking. But then if we're looking towards the future, towards the green future, and we're actually going to deal with climate change, then we shouldn't really be thinking about parking at everything. There is, however, a car park just here, which belongs to the town council, which could be used with the footpath going down. So this is the site of the station. As you can see, there's a railway and there's a trains. The house is actually the old station master's house, now used as offices, but it's all that's left of the actual station. So, but the site is still there and is protected. So it needs platforms, it needs a DDA compliant footbridge, and actually a ticket office or a ticket machine, and that is actually about all it needs, really, and signalling, obviously. These are the arguments we've put forward for it, really. Gloucestershire has a low level of train use compared with other rural counties, and part of the reason for that is that there's not many stations. And as I've already said, the obvious thing, there is no direct public transport link from the Stroud Valleys to Bristol, which is our regional capital. So what happens? People get on the M5 and drive down. And so we've got to provide an alternative to that, and also a way to get there for people who don't drive as well. I just had a message to say my internet connection is unstable, so I just hope it doesn't go. So the big reason really, I think, is the climate emergency and the fact we've got to get modal shift, we've got to get people out of their cars. And there's also a lot of development around Stonehouse, and I'll come back to that issue in a minute. These are the populations and the increase in population, which of the different areas, just for information. But I don't want to go into that in detail, I don't think we've got time. So we set about getting support from as many people as possible. I should have said right at the beginning, this is a long-running campaign, and it's not specifically my campaign. It's been running for a long time, but Stonehouse Town Council reinvigorated it a few years ago, and we've been plugging away at it since then and gaining momentum. I'll come to the big sticking point in a minute. So it's very popular amongst local people. It was the most popular project suggested in the neighbourhood plan when we did our neighbourhood plan consultation in Stonehouse. We had 1,352 signatures on a petition on the Gloucestershire County Council website. We've got had supporting motions passed in a whole load of local parishes and neighbouring towns. Stroud District Council are very supportive. Our MP is very supportive. The landowner is supportive, that's an important one too, and local businesses are supportive. Now, you'll notice what's missing from that list. The County Council, who are the transport authority, and they are the ones we're having trouble getting on side. Hence, that's why we put the petition there. It is possible to do it without the active support of a transport authority. We'll come back to with that one, but the local transport plan has just been revised. It has a commitment to reducing emissions. It has a commitment to the increased use of rail, but the last bullet point there is a direct quote from it. And this is what they're actually intending to do in terms of new stations. So they're looking at a site without any apparent urgency. But the bit I've highlighted, I think, is key. We need to be able to meet the long-term strategic growth over the next 30 years. They see a station as meeting future growth. They don't see it as meeting existing need. And I think that's the key point. That in Stonehouse, there is an existing, Stonehouse and the Stroud Valleys, there is an existing need for a public transport link to Bristol. Or that station from all the businesses in the Stonehouse Business Park, as well as the people who live there and the students who go down to Filton College. And, you know, there's an exhaustive list of people who could use it. But I think they're only interested if it enables more housing to be built, basically. There will be more housing. We've just had a whole load on the edge of Stonehouse, and there will be more, but not the numbers they're thinking, probably. So I think that is one of our two sticking points. The other sticking point is the timetabling issue. Jenny, you might have to stop me if I go over time, sorry. The fast trains down to Bristol go all the way from Aberdeen to Penzance, the cross-country ones. Interrupting their timetable is a big no-no, understandably, I suppose. So it is hard to fit in these stops without disrupting that train, basically. That is the issue. And that's why they're saying that the constraint that they're saying there can only be one new station. Now, it can't be beyond the wit of Network Rail, whoever it comes down to work out a way around that one. And I think you could do it by putting in sidings, you know, passing loops so that trains can pass each other. But that is one that I don't have the expertise to solve, but I'm just sure it must be solvable. It must be possible to have more than one new station on that line. So this is where we are. We had a stakeholder meeting just before lockdown. We just got it in before the first lockdown in March 2020. And we put in a bid to the government's Restoring Your Railways Fund. We didn't get the money, but we had a very positive response, basically saying, keep going, you need to get more support. You need to get support from your transport authority, unfortunately. So we set to work to prove support, which we knew we had, and persuade the county council. That resulted in a small change to the LTP, but what you saw was the changed version. It didn't change from that. We have meetings with various people. Siobhan Bailey, our MP, has been very supportive on this one, and she's been to lots of meetings. She has tried to persuade the county councillors too, but didn't succeed, basically. But we did gain a lot of useful advice. The other thing we found out is that Clumpton and Wellington in Somerset Devon border, I think it is, are actually doing this without the active support of their county councils, although they've got sort of fairly passive support. So it is possible. So we're now looking at ways of doing it without the transport authority taking the lead, which will involve the district council to a large extent taking some of the lead, I think. So we put in another bid, we revised to, and this time SDC put it in on our behalf for the money for a feasibility and a timetabling study, which is key. And we're awaiting the result of that bid at the minute. But if we don't get it, we will look at other ways of getting that money. And we do have some other sources of money. So thank you. Questions, thoughts, advice, but at the end of the session. Thank you very much. Back to you, Jenny.
Thanks, Carol. Thank you, Carol. Always interesting to see where we're at in this campaign. It is something that has been on the green agenda locally in Stroud for a long time. And I think that, the key messages that Carol's getting across are that we need more local support, that we need more raising awareness of this issue, because there's so many people that could benefit from it that don't even realize that the possibility is there, I think. So yeah, thanks. And let's hope that we can start planning for the future a little bit better. There have been a few bits in the chat, Carol, so if you want to have a look as we go, but we'll definitely come back to them anyway a little bit later on. Okay, so I think next we've got Richard Lloyd. So Richard had a long career in the Countryside Commission and Countryside Agency, which is now called Natural England, where he was involved in rural policy, especially in relation to national parks and areas of natural beauty and land management. Since retiring, he served the Forestry Commission and the Secretary of State appointed the Cotswold Conservation Board. He's also the Vice Chairman of CPRE in Gloucestershire. So Richard, your 10 minutes starts now.
Right, thank you very much. Yes, thank you for the invitation to join this meeting tonight. As you've heard, I'm Vice Chairman of CPRE in Gloucestershire. What I've been asked to talk about is a national campaign called Every Village, Every Hour, which is about buses. But before I get to that, and I've got some PowerPoint slides, which I hope we can crank up later. Firstly, a little bit about CPRE generally. I'll be very brief. And our interest and involvement in sustainable transport policy. CPRE is an England-wide charity. We've got a national office in London with professional people and all of that. And we've got 42 local groups. Basically, each county has got a separate group, and we're CPRE Gloucestershire. And all of those different bits are independent charities, which makes for interesting discussions. Anyway, our purpose, basically, we campaign for a beautiful and thriving countryside that is valued, enjoyed and accessible to everyone. And at the heart of much of what we do is to engage with the planning system and with transport issues to encourage more sustainable patterns of development and very much to support rural communities. So that's really what we're about. And I've got three key principles here which we advocate where we can in relation to transport. Making the best use of previously developed urban land and transport infrastructure. So making the best use of the infrastructure we've already got is the first priority. And then very importantly, ensuring that major new housing provision goes hand in hand with the provision of local employment opportunities and local services, and very much including good public transport links to reduce the scale of need for out commuting and to access essential services. And then lastly, very importantly, securing a significant modal shift from the use of private cars to sustainable development options, not just to help solve the increasing problem of congestion and air pollution, but also crucially now to contribute to mitigating climate change. And all of this clearly requires major improvements to public transport provision across the piece. Now, on climate change, I'm delighted that you've linked all this with the conference coming up, the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference of the Parties, COP26. Now, emissions from the transport sector are now the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions, and they're the only sector, transport's the only sector where emissions are still rising. So we're in a fairly lamentable position on the transport side, and clearly action in this area is very, very vital. Now, the local transport plan has been mentioned. We put a great effort into feeding our views into the LTP, the 2020-2041 version, as you clearly have done. And Carol will be pleased to know that we too have been campaigning for a new Stroud Water railway station on the Bristol route, inputting to the transport plan. And I attended the meeting which Stonehouse Town Council, I assume, hosted about a year and a half ago before all this COVID thing in the hall in Stonehouse. I came along to that. Can I just digress very quickly on this, on the Stonehouse thing? Two developments this week which are noteworthy. The first is at South Gloucestershire Council, and I'm in South Gloucestershire. They're putting in a bid for funding for Charfield, which is the one other station on the Bristol-Gloucester route, which has been on the stocks for ages. And there's been a lot in the local newspaper about that. So they're hoping to get funding through the West of England Combined Authority to get Charfield up and running. That's the first thing. The second thing this week, the major junction improvements outside Bristol Temple Meads has been finished with additional capacity, and we've heard that the Bristol-Gloucester service, which stops at Dursley, is going from hourly to half-hourly frequency as from the December timetable change. So that's really rather good. So that's an extra train per hour shuffling up and down, which won't help the capacity issues. But there we go. We're promised 2 trains an hour from the December timetable change on the Bristol-Gloucester local service calling at Dursley. So that's a slight digression. And currently, just lastly, the County Council is allegedly should be developing a bus service improvement plan for the county with the crazy deadline of getting this in place by the end of October. And this is required by the government under the Bus Back Better National Bus Strategy for England. And that's going on, and we're trying to engage in the process, but it's very strangely quiet at Shire Hall, and we're not having much success. But we've been promised an opportunity to engage in that. That's a very important process. Okay, let me rapidly go on to what I've really come to talk about, which is the Every Village, Every Hour campaign. Now, sharing a screen, you've got this thing at your end. I'm just wondering how I get it get at my documents to find this thing here.
So on the main screen, Richard, right at the bottom, if you hover your mouse over the bottom of the Zoom page where everyone's cameras are, there should be a square with a arrow pointing upwards.
Yeah, well, it says
if you click on there.
Yeah.
And then you should have the option, if it's a document or if it's a PowerPoint, it should be on that screen. And then if you click on that,
I'll have to get into my main files. This is the trouble. Well, I should have put it on the desktop, shouldn't I?
Yeah, if you open the file that you need, then go through that process, then it should be there for you.
Right, let's go into recent. All sorts of funny stuff on here. How am I going to do this? Oh, this is tiresome. It's not essential. I can talk to all of this, and I will send you the PowerPoint afterwards, which is a nice little summary which you can circulate. Do you want to do that?
Okay, yeah, that's.
And I'll press on.
Fine.
I'll press on.
Yeah, no
Otherwise,
problem.
we're wasting time. Right. Working jointly with the campaign for. Let me close this down. Right. Working jointly with the campaign for better transport, last year, National CPRE published research into the phenomenon of transport deserts. We call them transport deserts across rural England. And those were defined as areas where people are severely limited in their ability to connect with friends and family, benefit from employment and education, and access shops and other services. Then the research focused on North East England and South West England, and it found that 50% of small rural towns had become transport deserts or are at serious risk of becoming transport deserts. And that was clear evidence of the failure of our current bus system to meet the needs of rural communities. So the Every Village, Every Hour campaign argues for the re-establishment of a comprehensive bus network across England, and it then goes on to examine the scale of investment needed to make such a network a reality. So that's what this was all about. And it's all based on research and modelling carried out for us by Transport for Quality of Life and funded by the Foundation for Integrated Transport. So a lot of time and effort's gone into this. Quickly going on, the main findings, well, firstly and obviously, I think bus services are essential to decarbonise the transport sector by providing an alternative to private car travel. They also provide numerous public goods and are essential for people who do not have access to a car. They can help reduce traffic and air pollution while boosting high street spending employment, social mobility and equality. That's all obvious stuff. But the inadequate statutory framework for ensuring the provision of bus services for every community and cuts to bus funding over the years have resulted in a paucity of services to meet the needs of rural towns and villages. And we've all witnessed this over the years. It's got progressively worse year on year on year. Now we go on looking at what goes on across the channel in Europe. Examples from public transport systems, and the examples are in Switzerland, Austria and Germany, show that it is quite possible to deliver a comprehensive bus network that offers excellent connectivity to rural communities. For example, despite being considerably less densely populated than every region of England, the region of North Hesse in Germany has a bus system that ensures that services reach every village every hour for at least 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. Quite amazing. And obviously a similar level of bus services here will be absolutely transformational if we can afford it. But the reason that this is so is rural communities in the countries I've mentioned enjoy a far more comprehensive service because decent public transport is regarded as a basic right, even in remote areas. And in Switzerland, a minimum service frequency standards for communities of different sizes, these are enshrined in law, enshrined in statute. So it's seen as a basic public right to have decent public and efficient and reasonably affordable public transport. And that's the aspiration here. And we need bus services that are fully publicly funded with regulated contracts and timetabling designed to integrate with rail and other forms of public transport. And an integrated approach to network planning, timetabling and ticketing would help make public transport in rural areas a practical, convenient and attractive option. And it's got to be as convenient and competitive as driving the car at the end of the day, else we're not going to make much difference. So that's the game. Now, what would all this cost? What would all this cost? The modelling has turned up a figure of 2.7 billion. Now, that's a slightly frightening figure, but that would provide a bus to every village every hour across England from 6 AM to midnight, 7 days a week, 2.7 billion. Now, these are the recommendations. We're in the middle of emergency funding for bus operations as a result of COVID. That needs to be kept going, and it's got to ensure that the contractual terms of the bus operators are a fit basis for a transformed and fully regulated rural bus service. That's the first recommendation. And then we need to recognise the universal basic right to public transport and back it with statutory duties for local transport authorities to provide that Swiss-style legal minimum service frequency standards. And that might be a big ask for the Department for Transport, but that's what we've got to try and do. And legislate to establish bus regulation under the guiding mind of local or regional transport authorities in all areas, with the option for local transport authorities to contract services or provide them directly. And you reinvest the savings because you're not paying shareholder dividends to private companies. So that's the logic of all of that. Now, we then got to establish the revenue funding in the order of 2.7 billion a year. And that is a big sum. But there's a massive programme of investment in the strategic roads network, something like 27 billion, which is some of those projects are distinctly questionable in the light of climate change arguments and what you will, and more road provision you provide, you just expand the traffic volumes rushing around the country. So there's a big sum, and if you could redirect some of the money from that budget from road building schemes to fund the bus network, you could get a long way along this route. And we need to review the range of other fundraising powers deployed by local authorities in other countries and see what they do and are there lessons we might learn for England's transport authorities. And then there's the issue of cost. Ensure that the transformed rural public transport network is affordable, or better still free, but it's got to be affordable, to put an end to rural transport poverty and to provide an attractive alternative to car use as part of the response to the climate emergency. We can link it in all to those kind of arguments. And then lastly, investigate how England, including all of rural England, could move to a Swiss-style single national public transport timetable, aligning all trains and buses on a sort of pulse model repeated at hourly intervals. So that's the big aspiration. It's a super piece of work, and the last slide on the PowerPoint gives you the link. I'll tell you the download. You can just jot it down. cpre.org.uk, that's us, / every village, every hour, all joined together. cpre.org.uk / every village, every hour. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And I'm sure that our Stroud District Green Party will get that link into the chat as well so that people can click through from there. But I think, so many of the points that you mentioned were absolutely, felt across Stroud District and beyond in Gloucestershire and nationally in England around, equality of access, around the need for affordable and available, and also integrated, like you said, not just looking at these things separately, but seeing them as a whole transport transformation issue and making sure that we look at it as a system-wide. We've recently moved onto the continent, and seeing what's available there just makes it even more shocking as to what's going on in the UK with cycle motorways and lanes in every single city centre, as well as much more affordable train lines. So yeah, it's I mean, I'll always beat the drum of deprivatization. You can't get these private companies to talk to each other. We need one system, one company talking to each other and stuff. But very much thank you for joining us and taking us through your talk, and we would love to share your presentation with attendees after, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'll send you the PowerPoint again. You've got it somewhere, but I'll resend it. Yeah,
perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so our third and final speaker for this evening is Susie Medley, who moved to Stroud in 2015 from Oxford, where local and national transport links were very well established, unlike in Stroud, it appears. So in 2019, with the support and encouragement of Transition Stroud, Susie started a transport campaign for the area. One of its priorities, or its main priority, being buses in rural parts of the district. So she's going to tell us a little bit more about the campaign and how we can get involved now. So thank you, Susie. If you'd like to unmute yourself.
Right, there we are. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Me? Yeah.
Yep, we can hear you.
Right, sorry. Right, well, it's a bit CPRE is quite a big presentation and concept and report to follow, to be quite honest. And I've read it all, and it's very, very impressive. It really is. And Carol's plan for the station is brilliant as well. So I'll tell you where we started and what we've been trying to do. This is to make you laugh, okay? My personal vision in Wallace and Gromit style is to see little electric buses flowing all over the hills of Gloucestershire, full of happy people with their shopping, their friends, their pushchairs, their buggies, all just lovely, okay? And quite regular. Personally, I think ideally it should be more than every hour, because I think the best thing about a bus service, especially in a rural area, is you don't want to always be worrying about the time. Oh my God, I've just missed one, I'll be late. It is very stressful. You might have to walk or cycle somewhere to the bus stop. So I think ideally there should be really lots of them. that's my little vision, okay? We, as Jenny said, we first met in March 2019. Our proper public launch, our PPL, was planned to be April the 23rd, 2020, which had to be cancelled. Exactly. So, which is a real disaster because we built up a real momentum and a lot of support for a very exciting 2-day launch at the subrooms and on the bit in the front, the forecourt. Then, of course, because of COVID, people were going off travelling by bus drivers were feeling vulnerable. It all became a bit of a no-no, to be quite honest. So it all went a bit quiet, I'm afraid. And I think this pandemic has affected us all, and I'm no exception. And I'm feeling a bit, you know, but here I am. I've been invited. Thank you very much, Jenny. Winding myself up again. As Richard said, nearly everybody can get on a bus. Buses for everybody. And we decided to concentrate on buses because cyclists do have quite a good voice, actually, and there's already work going on developing, Carol laughs here, developing cycle tracks and so on, but also cycling along a lot of the roads around here. And I used to be a cyclist, but I wouldn't dream of cycling around here now. It's positively dangerous. There is so much traffic if you're actually on a road. So the more people getting on the buses, the roads should become safer, and of course the pollution will go down. There's this wonderful phrase the local authority transport campaigners have come up with, which you probably all know, called active travel. Hooray! It means, what it means is use your own legs, all right? You're the active one. So you walk or you cycle, but a lot of people can't cycle, won't cycle. Certainly a lot of people can't walk very far with their shopping. I mean, it's not feasible always at all. So the bus service has to be there. So yeah, we want to hugely increase the use of buses. And I want to point out too, as I'm sure you've all thought about, is that although electric cars are seen as a godsend, they're not, to be honest. They may create less immediate pollution, but the result of making a lot of cars and all those batteries is okay, but it's not going to solve the whole problem at all. We must get back to the buses. And they are for everybody. Everybody can get on a bus. But what, as Richard said, we need hugely increased service. And as in Switzerland, what a dream. I do tease people that I'm going to go and live in Switzerland, actually. And then they go, oh, no, you don't want to do that. But the bus service is amazing. At the moment, you can't go out in the evening and get back as well if the show is later than about 7:30. It doesn't work, which is ridiculous. So you need a bus service you can go out to, you can see people, you can shop, you can go to the theatre, you can see your friends, you can take your granny out, you can take your grandchildren out, and then you can actually get home. Ideally 7 days a week. This is a reality, and this is what we've all been talking about. It became clear after research into the present travel options and meeting with the 2 bus companies in the region, Stagecoach West and Cotswold Green, that what we need is a strong political strong political commitment with proper funding from central government. It's no good the local authority saying, oh yeah, well, we'll find you a couple of billion this year. It won't, and it's got, the whole commitment has got to be from central government. They got to, as it's got to be made a legal thing. That is a brilliant idea. It's got to be committed, and the money has got to go to the local authorities, or maybe there's another system of doing it, and it will be ring fenced there. It won't say, oh no, we can't do it on buses. this month it's got to go to something else. It won't work. There are plenty of other transport campaigning groups, as I'm sure you know. The local very active one is Dursley Transport Group, who have worked very hard to improve both the buses and the trains stops. They're a bit miffed at the moment because the new bus timetable that came out in, was it beginning of this month, end of August? They've actually cut some of the buses to the station, which seems completely daft. So she's working on that. Nationally, as Richard said, there's the Campaign for Better Transport. There's also the WI, who work very hard at it, and a group called Silver Voices, you may not all know of. It's a group that campaigns exclusively for the elderly. And I thought that was very interesting because they can get left out, can't they? In Europe, there's a very active one called Transport and Environment, who are very good, and they have a very good campaigning, and their heads are absolutely in the right place. They're based in Brussels. We also contributed to the, I'm sorry, I'm not very good at remembering all the titles that local authorities think up for their projects. Early 2020, we responded to their transport plan consultancy or something. One thing is we found important to point out is that buses are flexible compared to new roads and railways. That new routes and facilities are low cost and can be done quickly. Whereas, you know, a railway is a building, it's a massive project, but if you can get enough bus drivers or enough buses, you can just go, woof, let's go off that, you know, let's do it. So that's basically buses are flexible. However, at the moment, buses are unreliable. And this is one of the big criticisms because of the traffic and the lack of bus lanes. This is a big thing, the lack of bus lanes, they can't move around. The public perception also is that buses are dirty, slow for school kids and old people. So they lack glamour. So somehow we need to make buses glamorous, hip, the place to go. We really do. And I don't know how we're going to do it. There's also lack of information. There are no joint timetables. The Think Travel website is no good. And we need far more real-time info at the bus stops. At the moment, they are only, as far as I know, in Stroud, in the what they call the bus station, the main road down there at Merrywards. Fares are much too high. They really are. And as Richard said, they should be hugely reduced and ideally they should be free. Then everyone would get on the bus. I mean, it would be great, wouldn't it? But they should be free or certainly hugely reduced for unemployed students and school children. I'm not going into the small economics. I haven't done a huge report based on a lot of people's research. Demand-led is a very popular concept, and they do use that on the continent as well, and in some parts of this country. So you have a little minibus, or maybe even a taxi driver, part of the system, and you ring up and you say da-di-da-di-da. It can be quite expensive to use. There's similar things here, but it really, really needs good planning and proper funding. I did hear something they have in Germany when the buses are stopped running. Let's say you get back from a big city, you've had a good night out, you get off the train, and of course there's no buses, but integrated with the support system, are the taxi drivers. So you can ring a taxi who will step in and act like your local bus, and you would pay the same. So that's quite an interesting idea to think of. Cycling to bus stops. Inevitably in the country, a lot of people will end up cycling to the bus stop. I used to, I mean, I'm sure we can all say, oh, the old days, it was great. We went everyone bicycles and buses, but we did. If you lived in the country, you cycled to the bus stop. Now, nowadays, you would have to lock it up safely or be able to take it on the bus. both of these could be done perfectly simply. The problem of the bus station in Stroud, don't get me on this, which is not really a bus station. It's a nasty walk from the railway station. Ideally, we need what the new phrase, a transport hub, okay? So ideally, the buses need to get up and round by the station, integrated with the train arrivals. That'd be much nearer to a lot of the shops, not all, but it would be so much better. At the moment, the A46 is the main road running north-south through Stroud, and there's bus stops on either side, and it's not safe or easy to cross. It really isn't. Just also to add that different parts of Gloucestershire need different approaches. Therefore, locally based solutions to develop should be developed with the bus companies, users, and local authorities. I'm nearly finished. Am I doing all right? Our top priorities became, and I've got some little things to add here. You'll like this, Carol. Coach service to Bristol. I used to live in Oxford, where there was the most amazing 24-hour coach service. I know Oxford's much bigger, but it was a 24-hour coach service all day, obviously all day, every day. It was very reasonably priced. It would drop you as it went in and you'd end up in Victoria. And there were two companies doing that. There's only one left now. I don't know why. But it would be very easy to get to Bristol from here. We all know, because we all have to drive it nowadays. Stagecoach are reviewing this. Just to add, actually, before before this evening, I contacted both Stagecoach, and there's a new managing director there, by the way, and the continuing managing director of Cotswold Green to say what I'm doing and have they got anything they want to say or add. And she wrote quite a long, thorough letter explaining, and the coach service to Bristol is something that they are reviewing. The other thing we felt is safe walks to bus stops. So it's all very well having a bus stop, but if it's on a main road, it can be a nightmare getting to it, can't it? Especially if you're a child or they're too far. So you need safe walks to bus stops. The mini bus on demand call service should be developed. We also need better bus stops, improved services, and improved affordability. I put these together because they are all priorities for Stagecoach at the moment. And a little aside on bus stops, one of my favourite activities was taking photographs of bus stops, and I've been trying to encourage everyone else to do it, because if you actually look at them, they vary hugely. There's the one that's like a kind of Etruscan temple at Ely, and then there's one in Minch, which is right up by a wall, and it's been knocked down, so it's at that angle. It's like a bad joke, it really is. And then there's ones that they're just unspeakable, actually, a lot of them. However, I don't know if you know the road between Stroud halfway to Chalford, but Studio 18 commissioned artists to cheer up, improve the bus stops. And it's just wonderful, some of the things they've done. It's lovely. Improved affordability, well, we all know that. Bus walks, yes, this is something that they were even writing about in the local paper in the 1930s. Take a bus for a walk, okay? So you take a bus up to, I don't know, Selsley Common. You have a walk, and you either walk back to where you got, or you can walk back to Stroud. Or the point is to integrate where you can get off a bus and have a nice walk over to another place, or in reverse. But round here, in this very beautiful countryside, it would be perfectly feasible, and it'd be something that could be promoted perfectly easily. Electric buses are obvious, really. I know Stagecoach say they've got the latest version of don't know what it is it E7, which is the latest, best quality diesel buses. But in the end, are you waving at me, Jenny, to stop?
I'm just saying, giving you 1 minute, if that's all
Okay,
right.
I've
Susie.
actually
Okay.
just done it, really.
Oh, perfect.
Electric buses, ideally, and as soon as you're off the big interurban routes, you want small ones that are very agile. And bus lanes, well, they are important because they means things arrive. I mean, London's got them and things work there, and that's a priority for Stagecoach as well. And the latest survey was also mentioned by Richard, called the Bus Service Improvement Plan, which is all very well, but the choices listed, there's about, I don't know, 20 choices, and you only choose 3 favourites. But the trouble is, you look at them and you want them all. You know, it's just do it. Just do it. You go to Gloucestershire County Council and it's the Bus Service Improvement Plan. And that's it. That's me done. Thank you very much. And I would be very happy to revive the transport campaign properly. But, you know, some of us need to get together and get it going. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Susie. That was absolutely wonderful to hear. It was a very thorough cost benefit analysis, if you ask me. You said you didn't bring a report, but I think you gave a very good overview of, you know, the benefits, the positives, the negatives, the possible room for improvement that we've got, you know, some quick wins and some long-term goals that we need to be looking at. I think, you know, all 3 presentations touched on some key points. That we need to reimagine like urban planning and think like exactly what Carol said, plan for the future. We can't just be, you know, sticking plasters on these things anymore. We need a whole transport revolution where we look at a whole system transformation together, buses, bicycles, walking, trains. And I think that it was both Carol and Richard that mentioned, you know, the modal shift that is needed. And we've got to get people out of cars, but we're never going to do that unless it's incentivized. And whether that's by cheap travel, available, affordable, and like all of everybody mentioned, I think, you know, a timetable that actually fits with the convenience of everyday reality that people are living, you know, that fits around work and school and also fits around people's social lives. So loads of food for thought. I know that there's been lots of conversations going on. Also, Susie, if I can suggest that you should start an Instagram account called the Many Stops of Stroud or something like that, and take pictures of all the bus stops. And yes, I think
Good idea, actually. Yeah.
Martin mentioned maybe, and I think Stroud District mentioned that we've got one of the artists here, but the art, I'm sure someone will talk about it, but the artist project that went on with the bus stops in Thrupp was just really fantastic. So yeah. I will invite everyone to put their cameras back on if you'd like, and we can ask some questions. So I think I'm just scrolling through now. I think the first question was Peter Carter. Peter, if you'd like to unmute yourself. I think this might have been touched on, but I think it was by Susie, not Carol. So we might want to ask.
Well, yes, that's right. It was something that Susie mentioned. Carol, the unfortunate experience of rail projects is that they take many years longer than they really should. It's not just the finding the funding and doing the planning, it's actually fitting it into the complex business of actually giving a contractor possession of the line to do things and so on. Would there not be virtue in a publicly supported coach service between Stroud and Bristol, which would, if nothing else, test the water for the demands that there might be for a new station at Stonehouse?
Thank you. Yeah, yes, I mean, you're right, there would be, but I'm afraid that's someone else's campaign. It's not I could do as well, but yes, it would be great.
Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Peter. I think there is, you know, a lot of food for thought there. And I know that Carol, I don't know if coaches are allowed to take bikes on, but maybe that's a question that would have to be asked. But I think that, yeah, it might be a good idea as a temporary measure. Okay, I think the next comment was from Martin Whiteside. Martin, if you want to unmute.
Thank you. And it was just a comment that as a district councillor, I've been in many discussions about the station at Stonehouse with various Network Rail and other engineers, and they always seem to be assuming that and planning for a type of train and type of signalling from the 1950s, rather than trying to plan for the future of a type of train and signalling in the 2030s or the 2050s. And it's going to be very different, and I think it'll make opportunities for something like Stonehouse Station much easier, but they've got to think creatively into the future, not assume that we have these big, heavy, long trains signalled and driven in the way they are today.
Thanks, Martin. I don't know if any of our speakers want to comment on that as well. Feel free to unmute yourselves if you would.
Just to say it's encouraging to think like that, but there's a limit to how long we can wait, really, because the crisis is urgent and we really do need to get on with this. But it's a good point, Martin.
Thanks, Carol. No, I agree. I think all of this kinds of urban planning that is got to be looking forward to the future now. Same, I know there was a lot of talk around the roads budget being still absolutely enormous. Okay, who was next? Let's have a look. I think Simon Jacobson. You want to?
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering why is Gloucestershire County Council so reluctant to support Stonehouse Stroud Water Station when it's clearly beneficial to loads of would be beneficial to loads of residents of the county? What's the problem? And especially if South Gloss are going to have keenly backing a station at their end,
in Charfield, the Charfield scheme is really good, and there was actually a study that showed that Stonehouse and Charfield would work really well together to have those two open. But to answer your question, I think, and I'm speculating, don't take this as gospel, there are two reasons. One is, as I touched on before, they can't get away from the idea that everything has to facilitate growth in some way or another. And they see a station as facilitating basically more housing and possibly more industry as well. And in Stonehouse, Stonehouse is pretty much surrounded by housing there. There's not room for much more, although they are extending the West Oldbury, probably. Anyway, the second reason is that they're really tied up on the car, and they see the way to reduce on carbon usage as electric cars. And I agree with Susie that I don't think electric cars are the answer, but Gloucestershire County Council think they are. And they're based their transport strategy around transport hubs, bringing together different modes of transport, which is a good idea, but they can't see them not having huge car parks and being accessible by car as well. And basically, we haven't got room for a huge car park, and I don't know that we want one if we did, because we don't see it as being a station that people will access in the main by car. Although there will be some car parking. It's within walking distance of a town. It's on a bus route, it's on a cycle route, But so, come back to the buses in a way, but Stonehouse does actually have quite a good bus service. And it goes past, or one of them at least goes past the end of that road.
Yeah.
I think that's the two reasons. Yeah.
The growth thing from the county council's point, the aspirations of major new housing, and if that is south of Gloucester, we're talking about Wadden and places like that, and the other side of that is to add your additional station, if we can only have two, and Charfield's the other one, somewhere in the Wadden Hunts Grove area, and that is, presumably the county council don't want to lose that opportunity if you have the second station at Stonehouse. I suspect that's part of it as well. But we're going to have a review of the joint core strategy, which is the Gloucester, Cheltenham and Tewkesbury joint plan, which Stroud never joined when all that was being discussed. And we've got the garden town concept at Tewkesbury, which hopefully, and Ashchurch, which is hopefully is going to hoover up much of the population and economic growth in the centre part of Gloucestershire over the next 20, 30 years, which would take the heat off further development south of Gloucester. So there's a lot of high-level planning work to be done on some of these arguments. Very difficult.
Absolutely. Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Carol. And thanks for the comment question, Simon. Okay, so next in the chat is, I think Kevin, Cranston and Mavis both have very similar questions. So maybe we'll put them together. I don't know if one of you would like to unmute and ask the question. Whoever's first.
I've got unmuted.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Kevin. Thanks.
Yes. Part of the justification that the various people seem to be looking for is growth, or to justify a station. Have you thought of expanding your catchment area, which gives you more potential customers? I was thinking in particular, I think Mavis mentioned living in Horsley and saying that she would use Stroud Water Station. I was thinking if you included some of the southern fringes of Gloucester, Huntsgrove, Quedgeley, Kingsway, I would imagine that if you were cycling or even driving from there to Stonehouse or Bristol Road, you would actually be having a quicker total commute time from there to Bristol, rather than flogging through the centre of Gloucester, quite possibly at rush hour, and then going on a longer train journey. So you might be able to justify increasing the potential usage of it, as one suggestion.
Yeah. And
I have another question, which is I'm on. And there was an earlier version which put a new station for the whole of Stonehouse further north, between where the two lines start to converge. And you'd have a sort of easy change, so somebody coming from Stroud or even Kemble would be able to change to a north-southbound train. And if it was that little bit closer to Gloucester, it might even persuade people like the long-distance trains to stop there. And then you'd have all the sort of people who want to go not just to Bristol, but to Land's End or to Aberdeen. I don't know how many people there are, but it might just add a little bit. Certainly quite a lot of people would go to Birmingham and then they change to go up the west coast or the east coast, east of the country.
Yeah.
Anyway, those are just passing thoughts.
I come back on that one because this was muted, and it was there was a lot of push for a station at basically a Standish Junction where the line splits. There are a lot of arguments against it. I can see why it seems attractive, but okay, you could get off one train and get on the other, but you might, there's no saying that you wouldn't have to wait nearly an hour for the one going, well, half an hour now if they make them half hourly for the one going the other way. I'm not sure it would be necessarily, depending on the timetable, be any quicker than going to Gloucester and changing, to be honest. And the problem with changing Gloucester at the minute is the trains never seem to fit in, but it's possible it would help, it's possible it wouldn't. I've also heard that the line is unstable, the land is unstable around there, so the actual building would be difficult. And also I think it would make the time harder, because you'd have, depending on exactly where you put the station, you'd have to take into account the trains going to London as well as the trains going to Bristol when you're thinking of hold-ups, if you see what I mean. It just makes the whole thing that little bit more complicated, I think. Also, it would be pretty disastrous for Stonehouse, because it would almost certainly result eventually in us losing our existing station, which is within walking distance of people in Stonehouse, whereas that would be inevitably be somewhere people would drive to rather than walk, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Thanks,
That's
Carol.
good to know. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for your. I remember that discussion at Stonehouse Town Council, Carol. So yes, agree, and not a place that's easy to cycle to either, I believe. So it would cut off a lot of other transport getting to there. Okay, I'm just scrolling through now to try and find any other comments. Rob Brooks made a comment for Susie, I think, if you are there, Rob. If you'd like to unmute.
Mm.
Don't be shy.
Okay.
Where are you? Oh, there you are.
Hi, we can hear you.
Oh, I've forgotten what the comment was now.
It was just around buses
I
for
commented
villagers.
that I think buses are the best solution for rural areas, for villages particularly. But I personally think that trains and trams, though I can't see trams coming quickly, are much more pleasant to be in, and you can are much more accessible. Or trains could be accessible. I think there are problems with the platform heights and things, but they could be much more accessible. And I wanted to ask another question, which I'll ask now. Or I think lots of people would like. There is a late service between Cheltenham and Gloucester, a late bus service that runs all night, and I really think Stroud could do with something similar. You know, my son frequently goes to Gloucester, and if we don't want young people to drive and are driving less, we need to encourage that, I think.
Yeah.
Absolutely, thanks, Rob. I guess those comments including accessibility of these transport, different options, and also for accessibility for young people. I don't know if any of our Susie, if you want to come back on that. Was it, I think in your bio it said that you were actually...
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Because if young people are able easily to use a bus, then far more of them would, and would be a whole lot more livelier place to go, you know. Yeah, of course the buses should run late from Stroud to everywhere. You know, I mean, I know from Stroud, there's also a big orientation to go to Bristol for fun, all sorts of fun. So I think either the train is going to be amazing, or anyway, a coach could run from Stroud, not using the motorway, but straight down the A46. And you could stop at Nailsworth and wherever, but you know,
yeah,
maybe it starts a bit further up. But it needn't be competition for the train, because, you know, a coach can, you know, you write in just 2 or 3 stops between two important towns, and it's not going to lose much time, is it?
No. This
concept of, oh my God, we can't stop, we're all in a hurry. That is something I think we've slowly got to get away from. This is, sorry, I've got this thing that cyclists, keen cyclists, and I did live in Oxford where there are a lot of very keen young cyclists, seem to think they have to get from A to B as fast as possible, just like people in cars think they've got to get from A to B as fast as possible. And I think this is a mistake. We should all start not trying to get to places as fast as possible, but in the most pleasant way as possible, but still be on time, you know, I mean, anyway, enough of that.
We all need to take a breath and enjoy the view a bit more. So that's definitely. That's it.
I'm not saying that just because I'm a retired old lady. It's the only way to live now, really, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Or, you know, the cyclists or the runners or the cars, all in a hurry, they make the space they're in so unpleasant for everyone else. You know, it's the classic white van driver who just goes woof, and everyone's kind of knocked over. Every form of transport does it. It's a sort of...
It's road rage. That's it. We need to get off the roads. That's what needs to happen.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know you were talking about how do we make buses cool and hip. So I wondered if Gav, who's cool and hip, would just tell us a bit about the bus stop project that you did. Sorry to just like totally ambush you, Gav. But Dagan told me that you're online, so I would thought just if you could just tell us a little bit about what it was and how it went, and how you're making buses cool in Thrupp. Oh, he might not be here anymore. If he's not, then Martin, would you mind telling us?
Yes, I mean, it was an amazing project led by the parish council and Colette Wilson, the parish council chair. It didn't cost very much. The artists were asked if they would bid to totally transform what were really disgraceful bus stops along the London Road that came through Brisbane Club, and they were really horrible. And they've made them, each one has done it in a totally different way, and made them things of beauty, lovely to stop at, and made them a talking point, and made the buses a talking point. And that's what we need. A brilliant project, and Studio 18 was part of it.
Absolutely, thanks.
And it gave work to, as far as I know, mostly young artists who always need somewhere to show their work. And it was very imaginative. The commission, I think, Martin, wasn't it? Something to do with where the bus stop is, or that route, wasn't it? It wasn't just, oh, think of some mad idea and paint it on the concrete.
No, each artist was allocated a particular bus stop to design around. And the Highway Authority was not keen. We were told they would only use muted colours, and that just about persuaded them. And you see what the colours they used in the end. They certainly weren't muted.
That's great.
Absolutely, and yes, like you say, supporting the local transport system, but also supporting local artists, which especially throughout COVID and before and after is so important. Okay, I'm just whizzing through all of these. Liz Hillary, I think we had a question about timetabling. Liz, if you're still there.
I was just was interested to hear, I think Martin say that not all the trains have to be really long trains and take a long time, and that we could have maybe shorter trains. And I know that along the line from Stroud, you know, in the past there were lots of halts. I don't know how that word, I've only ever heard that word said. I don't know how it's spelled, but I'm assuming it's just a halt.
Yeah.
And the people wouldn't necessarily have a station, but you get on and off, which is almost like a request bus stop, which sounds brilliant, but obviously that would have implications for timetabling. So I don't know how that would work, whether that's even feasible, but you know, longer trains that are intercity, going to London, going to Birmingham, that's fine, but maybe shorter trains, just one or two carriages that are stopping at more stations in between, you know, which people could use a bit more like a bus. That would seem like a really good idea as well.
The local train service up the valleys as far as Chelford, that was a beaching casualty, but it was very well used, and it was a shame. It should never have gone. And that stopped at all sorts of little stations. There was Bleak Ashes Green, Downfield between Stonehouse and Stroud, and then Ham Mill, Brimscombe Bridge, St Mary's Crossing, and up to Chelford. And it used to shuttle down Gloucester to Chelford every hour, stopping at all the little halts. And it was very, very popular, but it didn't wash its face completely financially, and it bit the dust in as part of the beaching cuts, and it was one of the ones that shouldn't have happened, I don't think.
Thanks, Richard. A little bit of information there. I'm seeing a comment from Jane. I don't know if Jane can unmute herself. Jane's still on?
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. Anyway, it was just around stagecoach manager coming to the group that Susie had.
Oh yes, I saw that.
And giving an account of the efforts to make buses COVID safe, and they're super clean right at the start of the pandemic, and just putting in a good word for the high standards on that. So just keeping people who are still using buses safe throughout COVID, and obviously bus drivers as well, I'm sure.
I saw that as well, and was going to say something. the government messaging about public transport not being safe at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, the damage has been done, and it's going to take years to get public confidence back. And that is going to be a very long drip, drip, drip campaign. All right, you've got the office workers in the big cities, but use of the London Underground, 50% are normal. But it's 2 million a day now, but nobody seems to be catching COVID in London. But it's way, way down. But road traffic use is back to pre-COVID levels, and jams all over the place. But bus service patronage is way down, and rail traffic patronage is way down. And it's going to take months to get back anywhere near where the volumes before, which has a major impact on the economics of it all. So, you know, it's the best bit of campaigning the government have ever done, and it was an own goal, really.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, sure, Susie.
The new MD of Stagecoach West, Rachel Julia Massey, I haven't met her, but we exchanged emails. She wanted to point out that the lack of drivers, because there's a lot of bad publicity now about buses being cancelled, is because there is a lack. I mean, the bus being cancelled is the lack of drivers. They're going off for better paid or more interesting work. A certain number have gone back to their European home country, and it's not very well paid, and So she's hoping that when the whole employment situation, I don't quite know what she means, settles down, that there will be more bus drivers, more training, and all that. I would also like to point out that a lot of trains are getting cancelled at the moment.
Yeah.
So that you get on a train, the one before was cancelled, and the train you've got on is absolutely packed.
Yeah.
And this is in the middle of the day. So it's not just buses. I'm afraid to say, I think the buses are easily picked on. They are. They're like the kind of bottom, you know, underdog. Oh, the buses are, they're always late with that. But actually, the trains are cancelled. They're late. They can be just as filthy and unpleasant, you know. Anyway, she just wanted to make that point, that she's hoping that there will be more bus drivers coming. But she's obviously engaging with the whole transport problem. And maybe when the transport campaign, when we meet again, we can ask her along or something like that. Okay,
that'll be interesting.
Someone else. Yes.
Although I can't see that the employer can say that the fact that they're low paid is the reason they can't pay people, because they fix the wages. But she's not saying they're low paid, but I know they do. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Now I was going to say, taking up your point about trains being late, buses being late, driving on a motorway makes you late too. How often do people get stuck in traffic jams? And you know, they say trains aren't reliable, buses aren't reliable, driving isn't reliable. You know, you can easily get a jam on the motorway and be sitting there for ages. So coming back to Susie's point, really, why are we in such a hurry all the time, I guess?
Absolutely, thanks, Carol, especially if you're driving at peak times. So absolute nightmare. Okay, so I'm conscious we are hurtling towards 9 o'clock. So I'm just going to whiz through. I think Martin Kutcher's just asked a very interesting question. So I'm going to bring Martin in, if that's all right. Hi, Martin.
Okay. Hiya. Yes, obviously there's lots of change going on with autonomous technology and electric vehicles, I mean, which could make an amazing amount of difference for sort of local transportation systems. But given that that technology isn't there at the moment, you know, how can we plan to change things in the short to medium term?
Thanks, Martin. Any of our speakers?
With difficulty, I was going to say.
I think what's missing really political will, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you know, whatever technology comes in, it's not going to really help unless the political will is there to use it in that way. You know, new technology won't automatically help. And basically, we've got to act now because it's an urgent problem. and our priorities have got to change. So as Richard mentioned, all the money that goes into the roads, that money's got to go in improving public transport, not into building new roads for drivers. You know, we've just got to change the way we prioritise things and the way that transport and travel is looked at.
Yeah. What did people make of the local transport plan in the end, the final version? I mean, the consultation was 400 odd pages. It was a nightmare to tackle. What did you make of the final product? Because we thought it wasn't bad. It was given, a lot of the messages were right. It was the commitment and the willingness to underpin it with money to actually deliver the thing, and whether it was deliverable. But a lot of the messages seemed quite good, the direction of travel, and the concern about securing, you know, long-term modal shift and all that. It said all the right things, but it's delivering it was the issue. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what others made of it. We thought it wasn't bad.
Jenny, if I could come in on that one, I think that was very much the impression that we had in the transport group, that there was some very welcome words and a big contrast from the sort of language used in its predecessor. But when you looked at the money is still being spent on roads. It's not being spent on the things which they say are now the priorities.
Yeah, exactly.
How they can live with this sort of bipolarity in their thinking, I don't know, but it's the most glaringly obvious problem with that plan.
Yeah.
Thanks, Peter, and thanks, Martin, for the question. If anyone's got a burning question that I've missed, I know we had a few comments about Gloucestershire County Council, Adrian, and I don't know if you want to come in on that. Sorry, I've lost my chat. I'm just trying to find it again. Adrian, did you want to come in on your comment on Gloucestershire County Council as the last one? Oh, and that was it. It was the bus racks. Lynn's mentioned them, but Adrian's had mentioned them as well. If Adrian wants to come in on the bus racks.
Yeah, so I've made a conscious effort to try and take buses, and it's just a horrendous experience. And as I alluded to, it's the sort of thing that you do because you've got no other option. And I tried to get from our house here in Whiteshill to Brimscombe last week by bus. 2 buses, it took an hour and 25 minutes. I could actually walk it in less time than that. And that's because both buses were cancelled. Somebody made a comment in the chat about real-time information. There's no real-time information, so you just stand there not knowing when the next bus is. I understand that there's a shortage of drivers due to, it's not due to Brexit, it's due to low pay. Because if you've got a PSV license, you can get an HGV license and earn twice as much money. But the problem is that everything from a county council perspective seems to be, if it's buses or trains, then it's a subsidy. If it's motoring, it's investment.
Yeah.
And until such times we can turn that mindset around, we will always be beset by people using buses, you know, are basically third-class citizens, and trains. You're a kind of weird second-class citizen because trains are expensive. They're poor by and large. It's a poor service, but it's an expensive service. So, you know, I came back from London a couple of weeks ago on a Sunday. Every service from Swindon to Stroud was cancelled. So you have a bus replacement service, which adds 40 minutes to your journey. It's just horrendous. But that's the problem. The county council do not see anything like investment in public transport as something that they want to put money into. Everything seems to be in roads. And I think there was a comment on Facebook earlier today that by contrast, Herefordshire County Council have made all buses free every weekend from last weekend.
Yeah, very good.
No passes, no tickets. You don't have to do anything. You just rock up, get on a bus and use it. And I think until we can have a situation where people are persuaded out of their cars onto a bus and to try it, we will always have this clear distinction between car drivers and everybody else.
So what
Thanks, Adrian. Sorry, Susie?
I'm just saying, so what do we do to get people onto the buses? Lots of people, and make the buses better. It seems, I don't know. There's quite a lot of councillor sort of people here. Maybe you can all work on it in your chambers.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's been on the green agenda for a long time. Yeah, support proportional representation, get more Greens into power. I think that this is, you know, the agenda that we've been focused on, that we need a transport revolution, that we need to have social justice, equality for all, whether it's equality in terms of rights or love or access to transport. Equality across the board is what we need. And I think that, I mean, Adrian summarized it perfectly. I feel like we could just close the meeting now and I don't need to do anything else. But, you know, I think all the things that we've spoken about tonight, these ever important community campaigns that are going on, brought by people like Carol and Susie and Richard, whether it's the national campaigns, pushing politicians to catch up with the public will that is there, that we just need cheap, accessible, affordable transport. I think that, I think it was Peter who said the word, which I absolutely love, the bipolarity, which I don't know if it is a real word, but I'm definitely going to adopt it. Where they say one thing and they do another. They are people pleasers and they are not people of action. And I think that we need to elect people who are action-based and who keep promises and who are focused on creating a better community across the board, and that includes transport as well. So I think that's it for this evening. If you enjoyed yourself and want to join us for the next one, then please keep an eye out. You can sign up for our Stroud Supporters newsletter and you'll get the information straight into your inbox. So makes it a lot easier for you. We are also on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter, and we do have a YouTube channel where all the recordings are held. So please feel free to follow us, find us and say hello whenever you'd like. Thanks to all of our speakers so much for taking the time out to talk to us. It was really interesting, and obviously there's been a lot of debate about this. It's a subject that's close to a lot of hearts. And thanks for everyone who signed up and joined us as well. We always love having these discussions and they're always very interesting. So really appreciate everybody's time. If you've got any questions, or if you want to suggest a topic, or if you think that you want to start helping out with the organization of this, because I'm sure Elizabeth, wherever she is, would love some more help. Likewise, Lynn and Barbara and everyone else who's involved in the making of the Cloud Cafes. It was so lovely to see you all, and see you later from Brussels. Really nice. If everyone wants to turn their cameras on and give us a smile and a wave, it's always lovely to see your faces. All right, thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks, bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, guys. We'll see you soon.